We would like to reemphasize that LGB Alliance USA is a nonpartisan organization, and we don't endorse political candidates. Our agenda remains the same today as it did before the election. We stand for the rights of gay, lesbian, and bisexual individuals, and we will hold any party, politician, or political candidate accountable for their promises and actions. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the LGB Alliance USA News Roundup for the week ending in November 8th, 2024. We are here with Carol and me, Arianne. Here is our summary of this week's news. A House committee has sent a letter of alarm over Dr. Johanna Olson-Kennedy's refusal to publish her findings on puberty blockers. New York's controversial Amendment 1 passes, and Democrats second-guess trans activism following election defeat. We'll start with you, Carol.
Thank you, Arianne. The House Committee on Oversight and Accountability has sent a letter to the National Institute of Health expressing alarm over Dr. Johanna Olson-Kennedy's refusal to publish her findings on puberty blockers. We reported last week that Dr. Johanna Olson-Kennedy told the New York Times that she is refusing to publish the findings of her study on puberty blockers for gender dysphoric minors. She believes the results will be used to discredit child transition. Well, it looks like Dr. Olson-Kennedy might be in a little bit of trouble. According to reporter Benjamin Ryan on X, the House Committee on Oversight and Accountability has sent a letter to the director of the National Institutes of Health expressing alarm that Dr. Johanna Olson-Kennedy told the New York Times that she has withheld her findings. The committee has requested all research grant applications, summary statements, progress reports, unpublished data, and all documents and communications between or among the National Institute of Child Health and Human Development and the Department of Health and Human Services regarding her project. We will be following the story closely and report any further developments. Arianne?
Thank you, Carol. So now we're going to turn to gender identity and women's rights in the U.S. election, which just happened. Amendment 1 has decisively passed in New York. As of today, with 97% of the vote counted, the yes side has 61.9% of the vote. We have covered this amendment before. It is the initiative that billed itself as an equal rights amendment to protect women, including women's reproductive rights. However, it does so by sneaking gender identity into the protections. This has raised the alarm bells of many women's rights advocates who argue that Amendment 1 is deceiving voters by selling itself as a women's rights and particularly abortion rights initiative, when in fact it could weaken women's rights to single-sex spaces. It remains to be seen how the law is implemented and how it does or does not balance the rights of women with those of trans-identified males. What I find interesting is that as of today, with 97% of the votes counted, Kamala Harris is winning the state of New York by only 55.8% of the vote. This is lower than the margin Amendment 1 is getting and is lower than the margin that Democratic presidential candidates typically get in New York. In 2020, for example, Biden won New York with 60.9% of the vote. Democrats were hoping that putting abortion rights on the ballot would drive Democratic voters to the polls, but from what I can tell from the results, this did not seem to happen. Moving on to gender ideology on the campaign trail, quite a few people are noting the impact that Republican trans-themed ads had on the defeat of Harris and other Democratic politicians. Ads from the Trump campaign pilloried Harris for her previous support for using tax dollars to subsidize sex changes for prisoners, saying, quote, "Kamala's agenda is they, them, not you," unquote. Other ads focused on Democratic support for bills allowing trans-identifying males on women and girls sports teams. Now, at least two Democratic congressmen, Representative Tom Suozzi from New York and Representative Seth Moulton from Massachusetts, have said that their party has gone too far on the trans issue, particularly in sports. Representative Swozey told the New York Times that, quote, the Democrats have to stop pandering to the far left. I don't want to discriminate against anybody, but I don't think biological boys should be playing in girls' sports, unquote. Echoing a similar sentiment, Representative Moulton said that he doesn't want his daughters to be, quote, run over on a playing field by a male or formerly male athlete, but as a Democrat, I'm supposed to be afraid to say that, unquote. How many other Democrats echo this sentiment will remain to be seen. As for Trump's campaign promises, he has made curtailing so-called gender-affirming care part of his political platform this election cycle. The term generally refers to medical treatments and support aimed at helping trans-identified individuals align their physical characteristics with their perceived gender identity. And gender-affirming care, of course, has been a subject of debate across the U.S., with some advocating for access to these medical treatments as essential health care, while others call for restrictions, especially concerning minors. And Trump appears to be in the latter camp because in January of last year, he, in a video statement, released an agenda that pledges to 1, stop federal agencies from promoting sex and gender transitions at any age, 2, ban federal tax dollars from being used to pay for such procedures, 3, ban child transition in all 50 states. 4, support the creation of a private right to action for victims to sue doctors who perform such procedures on minor children. 5, order the Department of Justice to investigate big pharma and hospital networks to determine if they have covered up evidence of harmful side effects of sex transitions. And 6, ask Congress to pass a bill establishing male and female as the only two genders recognized by the government and that they are assigned at birth. The proposal is certainly bold and comprehensive, but it's unclear at this stage how he plans to implement this or even if he still intends to prioritize this as part of his agenda. He certainly made trans issues a big talking point this election, but of course talk isn't the same as action. We'll just have to wait and see. We would like to reemphasize that LGB Alliance USA is a nonpartisan organization, and we don't endorse political candidates. Our agenda remains the same today as it did before the election. We stand for the rights of gay, lesbian, and bisexual individuals, and we will hold any party, politician, or political candidate accountable for their promises and actions. So, what do you think, Carol, at this election outcome?
I'm not surprised at all, actually. A lot of people tend to be very surprised, but I'm not because I think because I'm in the trenches of the trans stuff, right? So I know how many people are working behind the scenes to try to bring awareness to this, and unfortunately, this was such an easy give to the Republicans from Democrats, because when it all comes down to it, this isn't just about reality. That's it. It's just about reality. And the Democrats cannot have a conversation. They cannot acknowledge reality. And this is, I don't know, as a Democrat, I'm just like frustrated with my party.
Yeah, and I think the way I put it is, I mean, the Democrats were trying to make this about like women's rights. Like, they were the party for women's rights. They put all their eggs in the abortion basket, but I think a lot of people are asking, how can you be the party of women when you don't even know what the definition of a woman is? And
Absolutely. And you and me both know that the vast majority of the women fighting against this right now are Democrats or former Democrats, right? So this
yeah,
is the other issue with the Democratic Party at this point is that they won't acknowledge that there is a lot within their own ranks that do not agree with this. They keep going. Anytime you want to say something that isn't the party line, they'll go, "Oh, it's right wing," and it's like this particular thing isn't necessarily right or left. This is a social issue. This is a societal issue, and they won't have a conversation about it. That's what's so frustrating to me.
yes, I think the problem is that so many of these Democrat elites, they're just that. They're elites, and they're living in a sort of elite bubble, one that's heavily informed by academia, and one that's heavily informed by a lot of social media. So they don't understand that a lot of their rank and file voters are not buying into a lot of these ideas of like queer theory and trans women are women, that these are ideas that for a lot of people are kind of like, what?
And how I also wonder how like how narrow-minded are Democrats at this point that they don't understand that, having recognizing homosexuality and same-sex marriage was already sketchy, right? That's already a hard sell to a lot of Americans. And even though it's gotten better, it's still there, right? But now you think you're going to come out with this saying that there's no such thing as men and women now and people can just identify as whatever sex. I mean, this just bonkers. Like, how could they not see that this is going just way too far? And also, they're supposed to be the party of facts and science, right?
Yeah, and what my suspicion is what's going on is with same-sex marriage. The Democrats are looking at how it took them a while to support same-sex marriage because same-sex marriage, like you said, it was a tough sell for a lot of people. It was not doing well at the ballot box. A lot of Democrat politicians dragged their feet on endorsing it. And I think that now a lot of Democrats are feeling sort of remorseful about that. They're thinking like,
Mm.
well, we were on the wrong side of history on the gay marriage issue. We listened to the masses too much on that issue in some sense, and we should have just done the right thing. And I think a lot of them, my guess is that a lot of them are seeing the trans rights stuff in a similar lens. It's possible that they do know about some of the liability associated with it, but they're still doing it anyway because they're hoping that people will eventually get along. Like,
And of course, I mean, we can't blame them too much. The normies, right? They don't know what's going on, right? It's been all the big organizations have squashed us all together, the LGBTQ plus, right? So like, how are they supposed to? Most people don't know the difference, honestly. Most heterosexual people don't really understand much, and they just gonna go off of what the basic media tells them.
yeah, and I think, I mean, just that phrase, that acronym LGBTQ, it's basically just become a word in the English language
Yeah.
at this point. People aren't really focusing on what letter means and the implications of each letter. It's just a very annoying word.
Well, also, if you notice in media, anywhere it's talked about, it's always LGBTQ people. What is that? There's no actual. So they're just like, we're here to protect these LGBTQ people. They're all very, these very special people. Like, what are you?
Yeah. And I'm 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 curious. I mean, I think everyone who's paying attention to the issue is curious to see how the next 4 years are going to go, the next 2 years are going to go. Um, I mentioned before that there are some Democrats who maybe are second guessing things, but will they for the midterms? How is this going to play out in the midterms when the Democrats are going to want to do everything they can to win back the Senate and House?
I
Um,
mean, this is how like democracy kind of works, though, right? Like, the people have to push the representatives to do what they're supposed to do, right? The representatives are only going to do what the people want them to do. And if they're out of the loop and they're not listening and they're not being open and honest and having conversations, then it's going to take them falling on their faces to realize, oh boy, maybe we did the wrong thing. Maybe this isn't what people want. And that's what happened, I think. That's exactly what happened.
yeah, and one hitch with that, and this is something that was brought to my attention actually at the WDI conference this year. They had, and I'm really apologizing for spacing out on her name, but she was a Democratic legislator, I think state senator in North Carolina, who is known for being like, who was the one Democrat in the state Senate that voted against boys and girls sports. She broke ranks with the Democrats on that, and she spoke at the WDI convention. She made an interesting point that I hadn't thought of before, which is that some of these Democrats in states like that are more conservative or swing states like North Carolina, even though their constituents are often quite moderate, they still are very dependent on money and fundraising from people in states like California and New York.
That makes
That
sense.
that was a big light bulb in my head moment because I was always wondering like why even are, more swing state Democrats so stubborn about this, and unfortunately it sounds like yeah, there is like this sort of money that is feeding into what they have to say.
Well, you know what they say, money is the root of all evil. The money is always where it is, right? It's the same thing with the whole trans ideology movement. I mean, it's really gotten its power from the money. Yeah, as far as how the Trump administration is going to carry this out, I am curious about that. The thing that I'm thinking about though is that it could go that the Democrats go, oh, we made a mistake here. Maybe we should listen. Maybe we should be a little more, or it could just keep playing the same game and go, these crazy right-wing extremists, like if the Trump administration, changes these rules and overturns these things and outlaws stuff, then they're going to platform on that, right? And then come back again the next time. They're going to want to win so that they can get in there and like change it back to, protecting quote trans rights. And then the cycle just keeps going. Like because nobody's willing to talk to each other.
Yeah, that's a big worry, and it's sort of my more gender critical women's sort of extended social network. I mean, people have been voting all over the place, and
Yeah.
so you do have some women who voted for Trump despite historically being Democrats, not necessarily liking everything about him because they see that he will, or at least he's saying that he will make these changes to roll back some of the excesses of trans activism. But I also know some who are not voting for Trump because they sort of bring up a point similar to what you made that it could just be that this is fueling polarization. Trump is such a polarizing figure. So, whatever he does is going to be used by his opponents to do the opposite and double down. So, I understand both sides here, and so we'll have to see what ends up panning out.
These next 4 years are going to be so exciting.
They certainly are. And with that, thank you everyone for tuning in to our election special of our news roundup, and we hope to see you again next week. Thank you.